This sounds like operation or something like that. Saw blade's connected to the mandrel's connected to the saw is connected to the collars. You guys got that? All right, guys, welcome to Waynesville Garage. We're at the sawmill today. Again, happy hump day, it's Wednesday. It's hot and sticky. 68 degrees last week, gonna be 95 degrees or 100 degrees next week. It's gonna be hot outside. Anyway, we had some problems last week and the week before with the saw getting a little bit hot. The saw is not the whole assembly. The saw is actually the saw blade itself. And as it turns out, we didn't have any lead. So what is lead? When the log, and it comes from the right to the left, comes down here, the saw blade should hit the log first. The second part that should hit is the back end of the saw. That wasn't exactly happening. It was close to 0. And it really should be, that's a hard number. What should it be? I talked to Gary Garman at Garman Brothers. He's a rail sawyer. They saw commercially. He says they'll use up to 3/16 of an inch. I think we've got close to 1/8 of an inch now. We'll be a little bit light on 1/8 of an inch. So what we did, we pulled a Gary trick, and I learned this from Gary. Put all new bits in. Start with brand new bits. We know they're perfect, they're not biased, and they're nice and sharp. Then check the lead. So to check the lead, what you have to do is these guides keep the saw from flopping back and forth too much. Loosen the guides up, and then we do it in 4 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Measure it from here to the carriage, and then flip it 180, push the carriage down, and measure it again in 4 spots. We had pretty much, maybe a tiny bit, didn't have enough lead. But the way we could tell we had a problem is, I was looking at the boards we were sawing, and there was teeth marks from the saw where it goes in, and it goes into side, and then goes out to side. Additionally, the saw was getting hot, and it wasn't from the bearing or the mandrel, it was just getting hot, I believe from the friction, because it was rubbing it. And as Dr. John Clark, Frickin' Jeep, thank you John for all your help, said, when your lead isn't right, you're using 1/3 more horsepower, because you're trying to cut the log twice. And that's a good idea. So we need to pay attention to that. Additionally, when you see sawdust shooting up at you all the time, it's coming from the back. There shouldn't be any sawdust coming up out of the back. The reason it's coming up out of the back possibly is because there's no lead, not enough lead. So how do you adjust the lead? There's a book out there, and I'll talk more about it. I think it's Jeff's How to Operate a Sawmill or Troubleshooting Sawmills. It's very, very good. But they want you to take the belts off and stuff like this and play with it. That's just not very realistic. So what we ended up doing was, this is the mandrel. The saw blade is connected to the mandrel. This sounds like operation or something like that. Saw blade's connected to the mandrel's connected to the saw is connected to the collars. You guys got that? This is a slow collar, or a collar. The fast collar is the one that tightens down on the outside with this BAN, big American nut. These guys here are the 2 bearings. Oftentimes they get run too hot with too much grease in them because people over-grease them. Don't over-grease them. But if you look real carefully, there's this adjustment here and here. And what we'll do is we will slide this. Before you do that though, you've got to loosen up the rotating nut on the back of the other bearing. Otherwise, it ain't gonna work. So what we do is we loosen these nuts up, slide these a little bit so they're not under tension. So these are the bearings. These are not inexpensive bearings. There's one here, and there's one on the pulley side. And what they want you to do is loosen the ones up here, these 2 bolts up here. There's big nuts on them, nuts back there. And then you slide the bearing in here by tightening this and loosening that. And that's what Tom and I did yesterday. We have a little bit less than, I think, 1/8 of an inch of lead. We could probably use some more. And we're running the 48-inch saw, which seems to work okay. So when we ran it yesterday, we ran 1 cant through it. The saw started out at 78 degrees in the Inouti, and that's what it was when we were done here all throughout. And that's exactly what it should be. It tells us we done good. So what's our project for today? So Alan and I went to Tom's house, and Tom was kind enough to donate a poplar tree. We're running low on logs. So we sawed this guy down. I guess we meaning Alan and I. It's interesting because look at the size of the hinge. It's a 4-inch hinge, so it had quite a bit of lead on it. But Nick needs some 13-inch wide boards because I'm having a celebration of life for Rose Wilson, who is like 90,000 years old. Sadly, she passed away, and now Nick's got to take care of the farm. So before we do that, though, we want to help Nick out a little bit. So what we're going to do is saw this into boards, 1 inch thick, 13 foot long, and I think 13 inches wide. So I think that should not be a problem, because we get 21 inches here, 20 inches here, so we'll get a nice cant out of that. So that's what we're going to do, and we'll work on that today. So that's the project, is to get some of those. He's looking for some 15-inch wide boards. We'll see if we can get some of them too. Who knows? So let's get started. Thanks so much for watching. So just so you know, in this picture here, you've got the following actors. You've got Wayno with the orange hat on. We've got Tim, okay, who's one of the newer guys. We've got Alan with an orange hat on. And then we've got Andy with the green hat on. And Andy and Tim are some of the newer guys. They're great helps, and they're doing a wonderful job, and they're learning quickly. How about that? You may recall we put the 48-inch saw back on. It makes a big difference. That's what she said too. It's just a few inches. Anyway, it's 8 inches difference, and 8 inches gives us 4 more inches of log that we can cut. It would have cut right through this log. Although, what we've learned is the 56-inch saw, if things aren't quite perfect, is going to be a little bit more problematic. So one way to help troubleshoot it is put the smaller saw in there. We're probably going to switch back to the 56-inch saw just to check that out and see how that works. I think we'll be fine with it now that we've figured it out and got the lead on track, so to speak.
Down.
Well, that's all there is for this week, folks. Interestingly and very happily, the saw is running perfect. So recall, this is a 48-inch saw. It's got brand new bits on it, bits of the replaceable teeth, thanks to Tango 2, Tom, who helped put those on. Actually, he put them on. I watched. I didn't even help a whole lot. But we did check the temperature several times. I brought the IR temperature thing, and we shot it. And as John Clark, frickin' Jeep, has told us, the saw should be about ambient temperature or a few degrees more. It's pretty much running 78 degrees. It never got a whole lot hotter than that. And that was measuring it on the outside where the bits are and on the inside close to the mandrel. So I think we're going to be happy. Let's screw things up and put the big saw on and see how that works out. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Do me a favor, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what we're doing wrong. More importantly, what is a lead supposed to be? Tell us what you're running for a lead on your saws. That would be really helpful, especially if you've got a 48 or 56-inch saw. I think we're getting it figured out, but learning is harder when you're our age.